Good morning in the Americas, good afternoon for Europe and Africa, and good evening in Asia. My name is Marcelo Caetano, and I'm the Secretary General of the International Social Security Association. The topic of the webinar today is transitioning the workforce to a human and digital environment. Our moderator today will be Maribel Ortiz. Maribel, she works with us at ISA. We have as speakers Benoit Long. Benoit, he is the Senior Assistant Deputy Minister of the Employment and Social Development in Canada, and also Jean-Marc Vandenberg. Jean-Marc, he is the General Administrator of the Auxiliary and Employment Benefits Fund, CAPAC, in Belgium. Today, we have as registered countries, six free registered countries from all continents. So I wish you all a very good webinar, and I also like to thank the Technical Commission on Organization, Management, and Innovation for jointly organizing this webinar. So Maribel Ortiz, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. Welcome to all the participants who are joining us today. It is my great pleasure to welcome once again our two distinguished panelists, Mr. Benoit Long and Mr. Jean-Marc Vandenberg. I'm Maribel Ortiz, and I will be moderating the webinar. Before we begin, just a small logistical detail on how you can join the discussions today. At the lower portion of your screen, you should see a Q&A button. You just click on that and you should be able to submit your questions at any time. We ask you not to use the raise hand button because we may not have enough time for oral interventions during the webinar. My colleagues and I will be monitoring the Q&A and the chat buttons, and we will ask your questions to the panelists as we go along. Now, the topic for today is transitioning the workforce to a human and digital environment. For the past years, we have been witnessing rapid advances in technologies, and Social Security is benefiting from these new technologies. In fact, the disruption that the pandemic has brought upon us is expediting the use of digital technologies in Social Security. What these new technologies are is of interest to us, and our panelists may want to touch upon them. But the focus of this webinar is more on how, with the increasing use of digital technologies, how the institution is transitioning its workforce to this new environment. The use of digital technologies on one side must go hand in hand with the human and organizational transformation of the institution. These are just two sides of the same coin. You cannot have one without the other. And that's why we are so lucky to have Mr. Long and Mr. Vandenberg with us. Because as you may know, Canada and Belgium are among the pioneers in the application of digital technologies in Social Security. In fact, years before the pandemic happened, the Employment and Social Development Canada of Mr. Long already started a multi-year service transformation strategy whose goal is to transform the delivery of benefits and services in Canada. And one of the key elements of this strategy is the use of digital technologies. It would therefore be interesting to find out from Mr. Long how the initiative is coming along, and in particular, how the institution is helping the staff to transition into this new environment. In the case of Belgium, the Auxiliary Unemployment Benefits Fund of Mr. Vandenberg was among the main actors in a massive re-engineering of the entire social sector of Belgium. The transformation was nothing short of revolutionary. It took full advantage of new technologies to transform not just internal, but the external linkages and processes in the entire social sector of Belgium. This is why even before the pandemic happened, many social benefits in Belgium could already be granted automatically with no need for employees, citizens, nor employers to make any declarations. The thing is, by their very nature, we know that transitions take time, and transitioning the workforce to a new environment is particularly challenging. So, bearing in mind that Canada and Belgium have been in this transition process for some time, I would like us to divide our discussion into three parts. In the first part, let's ask Mr. Long and Mr. Vandenberg the what, why, how questions about the initial stages of the transition, the initial achievements, the difficulties, and how these were overcome. In the second part, let's ask them whether the capacities that they managed to build in the initial stages of the transformation, whether these capacities are actually helping them now in the face of the pandemic, what are working and what are not working, so that as we move forward in the transition, let's ask them what are the insights that they are gaining as they continue to deal with the pandemic, and what are the next steps that they foresee in the coming years. And so let's begin. Mr. Long, before the pandemic happened, the ESDC was already in the process of transforming its service infrastructure into one that was digital by choice. Please walk us through the transformation process, focusing on key technologies, the workforce, and the other things that went with that transition.
Merci beaucoup, Maribel. It's a real pleasure and an honor to be here today. Thank you, Secretary. We really appreciate the opportunity to share our experience, and it's always personally an honor to be with Jean-Marc. I always learn something with Jean-Marc, so I was quite excited about the ability to speak with him today about these changes, as well as I think I'm going first, Jean-Marc, because I'm older, but I'm not sure. So let me start by saying that, a pandemic is a crisis, and as everyone will always be able to relate to, you should never waste it, no matter how bad the situation is, as an opportunity to advance change. However, I have to say that part of our story is the fact that we had been getting ready for change for some time. We had developed strategies, we had identified a core set of service architectures around where we were heading. We had a target state of what we wanted to accomplish. And of course, we had plans, change management plans, including business transformation plans that would take us there. What the pandemic threw up in the air fully was we had to focus immediately on operational pressures that were massive. We had to make payments to millions of Canadians literally overnight, within a 2-week period, to actually stabilize their lives, make it possible for them to continue to live. And we had to fundamentally direct all of our energies very quickly to what did we need in order to do that. We were able to stand up a call center in a matter of a few days, even with a competitive process, with technologies that were highly scalable, cloud-based technologies that really gave us the kind of capability early on that we had promised everybody we would actually bring over many years. And so, of course, the timeline was so short that we had to learn something that we've almost never been able to get away with, which is planning at some level and doing at the same time. And so the practice, if you wish, of what we all probably refer to agile was put into play right away, but it was not even put into play yet into the transformation space. It was all about operations had to be stabilized immediately. We shut down our entire in-person channel. So that means 360 odd points of contact across the country. It's a massive landmass, as you know, 2 million square kilometers. We had to shut it down, and like everybody else shut down almost everything else. So all of a sudden, e-services had to be put in place in a matter of days, not months. Originally, we had planned months, and now we were doing things so rapidly. And of course, they weren't the full functional, the full meal that we were hoping to deliver through transformation, but they definitely got value to citizens immediately, and it pushed us immediately to a different place altogether. Now, as an organization, because the theme is around how do we actually transition people into that space, Well, our department, just our department, has 28,000 employees. And we went from a few hundred that could actually work remotely to within about 35, 36 days, having 28,000 working remotely. And so our call centers became virtual overnight, literally overnight. And they were prioritized, and we gave them the tools at home. We had people connecting to technologies from their laptops with cell and modular mobile phones. And there was no planning. What I mean is there was a high level view of here's what we're going to need to do. That took about a day. And then the next 10 days, 20 days, 30 days were about deployment. And so the planning and doing in rapid succession was a real fundamental shift for us. Now that's in the operational side. And I mean, I have to say it pulled at every part of the organization. But you know, when you're a transformation team, what do you do in a pandemic? Because the pressure is immediate, and transformation tends to be a long-term, you know, process-oriented kind of methodology. And the fact is that the transformation team said, well, we got together, we said, well, what are we going to do during the pandemic? So some of us went into operations to help the operations, but the vast majority of the team actually pivoted immediately to, well, we have an opportunity because we've made selections of technology. We do know the kind of basic things that we need to put in place. What if we actually do some prototypes, create an insurance policy? Because if our old systems, and we are dealing with ancient 60, 50-year-old systems that withstood the pandemic and so far, but actually we need to transform. And so we thought we'd actually go and deploy those systems right off the bat in a small fashion, iterative, quick, and then we would use that as an insurance policy. Well, it turned out that doing that gave us some systems and system capabilities that were so valuable and so good that within a matter of weeks, we had a system up and running. We had a production prototype up and deployed. And all of a sudden we were paying people off of a system that didn't exist 3 months earlier. And so the pandemic has taught us that, you know, the only limitation to speed is our own constraints around governance and oversight and all the things that really push us to write up artifacts instead of doing things as well as planning them. And I think that's a shift that even if I had spent 5 years as a chief transformation officer, trying to train everybody to believe in that, doing it has been the single most important factor for us completely. I will finish on the point that as employees, we've always, obviously, we'll have a chance to talk to a bit more of the consequences to employees. We virtualized everybody. And this is a service department, right? We're not talking about just the policy people and the program people. We're talking all the service delivery was virtualized nearly overnight. And that means that we're probably never going to go back to the status quo. And the question then becomes, what will that mean for the productivity of our employees, the mental health of our employees, because we've pretty much invaded all of their lives for many more hours a day than we've ever experienced before. And new norms will have to evolve, as well as new tools will have to be developed. So I'll get a chance to talk a bit more about that. But I think initially, if we hadn't been ready for a pandemic, I guess specifically, we were getting ready for transformation. The speed of transformation was accelerated significantly because of the pandemic. And now we will never go back. And now we're on change forever. And I have to say, as an organization, we probably have more appetite for more transformation than ever before. And we have proof to demonstrate to everybody that we can do it. I'll pause there, Maribel, if that's okay. And I'll give Jean-Marc a chance to tell us about his experience.
Thank you, Benoit. As you were talking, the image that came to my mind was like you in a boat, and the boat suddenly got caught in a storm, and the technology is the structure that's providing the thing that holds the boat together, and the crew of the boat are really the staff of the institution who are scrambling around to, you know, get this thing going. And so we can pick up on that later on. But let me ask Jean-Marc the same question. A similar question to you, Mr. Vandenberg. Please walk us through the changes that took place at the Auxiliary Unemployment Benefits Fund when the re-engineering process in Belgium took place some years ago, and how this has helped prepare the institution for the pandemic in much the same way that we can see from Mr. Long's intervention that the crew was actually ready for the pandemic, even if they were not preparing for the pandemic. When it happened, they really had, they knew what they were supposed to.
Well, that's very strange, but I think the same thing happened in Belgium than in Canada. So we were relatively ready for change, and our level of digitalization is relatively high. Not perfect for me, but it's quite high. But we were not ready for what happened with the pandemic. Not really ready, let's say. And in fact, I wrote a PhD thesis a few years ago, and my subject was about disruptive change. And one thing I used to say is that even a disruptive change, that takes time. Well, in fact, sometimes not when there is a pandemic. And so we have to adapt, and yeah, maybe that's what at the end takes time. So just to precise it, I'm a manager. I'm not a political actor. I'm not a politician, minister, or something like that. I'm just a manager of an administration that pays an employment benefit. And in fact, at the beginning, at least, and now it was the same again in September and October this year, with the second wave in Belgium. We were ready with something, with a process that took some time, but it was relatively fully automatized and digitalized. And then we had to adapt, and the government decided to change the rules, and that's hell, because in order to make it easier for the companies and for the workers or unemployed workers, and particularly the temporary unemployed workers, they decided to change the rule and to say, okay, no, you don't need anything, or almost nothing, in fact. Just the companies have to do one thing, and the unemployed have to fill one new form. And for our IT department, it was really hell, because just to make it fully differently, yeah, that was not easy. And yeah, it took few weeks before we could properly react. For certain cases, it was easy, and for others, it was really, really bad. So for certain unemployed people with very difficult situation and things like that, complex case, it took a week and sometimes months, because even in a easy process, people make mistakes. Sometimes they just fill their family name in place of their birth name and things like that, and that's hell, because it doesn't function with our national number and things like that. Even the company, it's the same. They make mistakes, and just they send a wrong file, and because it's a new process, and so it was not so easy at the beginning. So we had to work very, very hard. In our sector, so unemployment benefits, we received the support of other administrations that helped us, because at the beginning, the time to adapt, because the regulation were decided how to do, but we had to adapt, and we had to prepare the online registration and things like that. And it took a few days. But before that, it was already possible to fill just the paper form. So we had tens of thousands of paper forms. We had to uncode ourselves and to code, and that was not good, and the quality was not perfect. So it was a new story. So at the end, it was okay, and we had just last week an inquiry for 400,000 temporary unemployed people, and in fact 80% of them were very happy. That means they gave a result of 8 to 10 on 10, so that was very good. But 5% were really unhappy with the result of 1 out of 10, so that was not so good for them. The 5%, it seems not to be so much, but in fact, there are tens of thousands of people who had a difficult time because of the time we needed to adapt. And yeah, it was not perfect, it was not so bad, but it took it took time, as Benoit said. What else at this level? Yeah, at the level of our employees, we also had to adapt because we just closed all of our offices, and telework was the way to work. So it has changed after the first wave, and now it's still like that again. Yeah, as I said earlier, in September, we had the same problem because the former government, because we just changed of government, decided, because the first wave of the pandemic is done, and since it's like that since June in Belgium, so June, July, August, September, yeah, it was okay. So we had to, they decided to make the regulation a little bit stronger, with more controls and things like that, because there is fraud a little bit, but still there is. So to limit fraud and things like that, they decided to ask to organizations like me to implement new controls and things like that. But the fact to change again was another problem, but it was not so bad. But then came a new government in end of October, and in the beginning of November, they decided to change again. So every time we have to adapt. It's not so bad this time, of course, but still, every time we have to adapt on in a few weeks, that makes it quite difficult. And just to say, the most difficult part was, in fact, that the new government decided on Friday, 6th of November, that the rules, the regulation for October was changed. So it was not for the future, but for the past. And it means that the unemployed people say, okay, the rule changed, I want my money now. It was different before, and say, yeah, okay, we know it for two days, and sorry, or 1 day, and takes, yeah, still at least 1 or 2 weeks to adapt for every case. So I think tomorrow will be perfect, but it took 2 weeks to adapt. And yeah, in the IT world, yeah, 2 weeks is just nothing. It's just a fraction of eternity. Yeah, for the employees, it was quite all right, not so easy, but it's also linked to the motivation and the linked to the pandemic and yeah, death and things like that, because we have had quite a lot in Belgium, quite a lot of contamination. But yeah, for we had already telework, not for everybody. For the people meeting the citizen, it was not like that, or not a lot like that. But of course, yeah, we bought in 1 or 2 weeks a lot of laptops, and everybody went home, and still the system functioned with telework, and that was not a big problem. What I have to add, because my sector was it was quite a big challenge for unemployment sector. In the other sector, like retirement benefits and things like that, it was very easy for them, because the high level of digitalization and automatization, it helped them to pass the pandemic without, I dare not say, but without any problem. In fact, it was quite easy for the other sectors, but the sector who had to adapt on the short run, it was not so easy, and mainly unemployment sector. Voilà. I don't know, maybe something else, Maribel, or?
Yes, it's really very interesting because, you know, for Belgium and Canada, ESDC and the Auxiliary Unemployment Benefits Fund, you are relatively, you know, far, you know, into the transition already. And yet when the pandemic struck, it seems like you were both your institutions were thrown into a crisis mode as well. But what stands out to me is that you were able to do this plan and do in rapid succession, as you put it, Benoit, which and also to a certain, you know, to a large degree by Jean-Marc's organization, which I take it as meaning that the staff actually already had that preparation in order for you to go from hundreds, just employees in the hundreds who are teleworking, to thousands, 20,000 in a very short span of time, also shows that there is a certain readiness, a latent, I would say a latent readiness in the system, such that when the pandemic hit, when the storm hit, people actually knew what they were going to do. And so what I would like to ask the two of you is to step back a little bit, step back from the pandemic and try to reflect. Before the pandemic happened, what were your institutions doing such that people started assimilating the technologies, the level of digital literacy was elevating, was leveling up within the institution? How would you describe the workforce seeing, the staff are looking and seeing, hey, we're using more technologies? Was there resistance to it? Was there, there are certain cultural changes that need to take place? Could you please drill down on that a bit? Thank you.
Did you want me to go first, Jean-Marc, or do you want to go first?
Yes,
So
Mr.
I
Benoit.
will,
Yeah.
I have to tell you the playbook that we would have had planned for a pandemic, if we had planned for one like this one, we would have thrown out the first day. And I'll give you an example of how that happened. We were planning early March. We knew there were going to be a significant increase in people who were unemployed. And so we thought, okay, we could handle it with our current systems, even if they were old. And we had planned to augment the capacity, our ability to do more processing and all of that. Within 3 days of having declared the pandemic, this is March 12th or 11th, some of those dates are kind of burnt in our memories. We realized we were planning for 50,000 more unemployed a week, and we were getting 250,000 a day. And so we went from 2.5 million unemployed to 8+ million within a matter of 2 weeks. And so it took us a pivot from a Thursday to a Monday to introduce new legislation, to share the load of managing a program with two departments, the tax agency and ourselves, to completely eliminate most of the rules that existed in our systems in order to allow that kind of throughput. And so for the first time, I have to admit, the government got to understand the limitations of old systems, because they needed to react quickly. And we were saying, you can't do this, you can't do that, you won't be able to get away with this, it could crash. And so the first experience for employees is how to get around the whole problem of systems and the lack of digital capabilities. We were able to very quickly change the systems, make it so simple that it could be done, and then to enable the employees within a matter of weeks, very fast, to adopt technologies that they were familiar with, a computer, a mouse, a phone, but they were doing it at home. They were doing it with all the children out of school. And what we realized very quickly is that, we had virtualized everybody, but we had no real tooling to manage a workforce that was completely mobile, now working from home, where we didn't have any productivity metrics. We were doing our best, where some people were sick and some people were spending all their time because childcare was a challenge, because that was also closed. I mean, when we say lockdown, we locked down the country, right? So I think the notion of brute force is really the theme that I would want to use. Is that mobilization was not kind of a gradual, a Cotter curve of change here, 10% and then 20%. It went from 3% to 90% almost immediately. So you'd never get to do that again, because frankly, that level of mobilization is really hard to engineer. But when faced with a crisis, you get the benefit of it, but you also get the sequel. The sequel is going to be, like I mentioned, people who are working from home. We've had to change our policies and how we support employees. What are we going to support them with? Are they insured working from home? Do they have all the equipment they need? Are our systems going to break down? We had network issues to no end, because they were never designed to allow people to work from home. Nobody went back to the office. Our offices are still empty for the most part. I haven't been in the office for 9 months. And so it kind of, it throws everybody up in stream. But I have to admit, the one thing, many benefits, the fact that we're all virtual is actually simpler than if half of us were in the office and the other half were virtual. So that's a benefit that I can't say that we expected. We did have to push people quickly, but I have to admit that the public service, and I say this because I believe only the public service could react this way. The commitment and the passion that people have shown to do their jobs under enormous stress, knowing that their neighbors won't be able to eat unless they really get that payment out and they get the benefits out of the door, made a huge difference. It was like firefighters, right? You don't think about all the consequences. You just throw yourself into the burning house and you put down the fire. The commitment at the leadership level was supreme. People were aligned like we've never been able to align them because they just said, where's the exit? How do we get everybody there? We did not suspend our standards in terms of how to manage work and the quality of the work. We had to do it fast, but we also knew that if we made mistakes, it would not be helpful to anyone. So in fact, I would say the quality of our work has actually gone up under extreme pressure, which is an interesting behavior, which I won't be able to explain today. But I hope over the next few years, when I get to think about the pandemic again in a different mode, we'll be able to understand how that was possible. But I do believe that was true. And the biggest factor, I think, will come back to all of us as income security administrators and change agents across the world, is that simplicity is everything. If you've got simple programs, simpler programs to deliver, simpler benefits that actually meet the needs, but don't bring all of that complexity that all of us have to deal with, you can do almost anything. And we just did. We did stuff that we can't believe we did. I mean, we're still looking backwards and say, how did we get through? It is though, because the biggest factor was simplicity was engineered right from the top, immediately with the government. Politicians passed legislation, the opposition parties agreed to absolutely go as simple as possible. If it wasn't for that factor, I think we'd still be in March. And in fact, when we have transitioned now out of the original simpler benefits into the more complicated ones, we know we're going to have so many issues because most of our programs were designed for a non-pandemic era. But it has also taught us a few lessons on the policy, program, service nexus, the combination of those three. If policy folks can actually do user-centric, client journeys, the engineering of a policy that has the client in mind and not just the programming, I think every downstream step of delivery and the program management can be simplified, can be accelerated, and clearly can be digitized. So that would be my grand comment on this. It is amazing what we've been able to do with employee engagement, but I think over time, and I hope we do come back to it, we will have sequels from this. It will have an effect on a generation of public servants, how we do our work, how we view our work, and how far our employer, the government, is prepared to go to mobilize us even at home. Over to you, Jean.
Yep, very interesting anyway. About the question of resistance in a crisis time like this, there is no question of resistance. So the commitment with our workers was incredible. But yeah, for us, it's not done. The crisis is really not done, and we are still working very hard at a different level, but well, we get tired. But before speaking of about the changes the last months, I would like to say something. You don't decide change, and it's not so easy that you say, okay, we have to change, we will do it. And I will take an old example. When I was a really young manager 15 years ago, we decided, it was a sector in Belgium, it was not my due to me. So we were replacing the first forms with data fluxes. So so we explained to our workers, okay, you don't use the forms, the paper forms anymore, you use the data on the computer. And so we say this like that in June, I remember that, June 2006. And so we say, okay, let's do it. And it's much more interesting to do it like that for different reasons. And after a few months, the workers were saying, it's really tough because we have really a lot of work. We have much more work than before. And say that's not possible. The idea is to improve our productivity and quality and things like that. And those, we went to the local offices, certain local offices, not all of them. And in fact, what they were doing the same work as before on the paper form, plus the extra work on the data. So they were doing the same work 2 times because, yeah, they were used to do something for years and they didn't see the reason to change, and so they did double work. So just, you don't decide change. For me, if you want to get some change with the workers, you have to have one important thing. It's legitimacy. And the guy said, I don't remember what's his name, that there are 3 kinds of legitimacy. The pragmatic legitimacy, that means what do I get with it? So in the case of the pandemic, we can say, okay, we worked almost every weekend since March, with a small transition during the holidays. And we can say, okay, you get paid 150% for if you work during a Saturday or on Sunday, things like that. So what do I get? But that's not really important in kind of in this situation. We are more here in the situation of, let's say that it's like a burning platform. So you have to move, we have to do something, so we have to do something. And the legitimacy that was used, because it's just like that, it's a moral legitimacy. It means it's a good thing to do. And when you know there are hundreds of thousands, in Belgium it's smaller than Canada, when we have hundreds of thousands of temporary unemployed people and they need money, and it's important we help them, and that's what we use, that's what we say, and that's why we worked every week hours and hours. It's just we have to do our best because we have to make the difference for the citizens, and that's why the people, the workers, have done. And then you have the last kind of legitimacy. It's cognitive legitimacy. What else? What else? That's a good thing to do. It's just, you don't take time to say, oh, there are unemployed people and it's 4 o'clock, it's time to stop, and the system is not functioning. But it's not a problem, we will do it tomorrow. No, you just go on and you go on and you go on and you do it and you do it. And there was really a lot of stress. And yeah, they have done it, we have done it. And it's, yeah, as I said, it's not done. So I think it's a good way to do. One thing that is also very similar to what Benoit said is that in my organization we had a not the long run, but yeah, we had a strategic planning that is named Horizon 2025. So it's the planning for the 5-6 next years. And in this part, we had a project, big project, most important project. It's the Office of the Future. The idea in the Office of the Future was to increase telework, in particular for the workers in contact with the citizens, to increase the number of apps. We had the idea to make digital zones in the local offices to help people who had problems with digitalization and things like that. And in fact, we have done almost everything in March and April. So our Horizon 2025, it's done really, except the digital zone, because it's not possible. It's not safe to do it. But all the other elements, telework and things like that, just in 1 week. Not really 1 week, but yeah, we have done everything. So next week we have a strategic meeting with my board just to say, okay, what's our planning for the next years, and to negotiate with the new government. So that was very interesting to have a crisis, because the thing we wanted to do on a few years, we have done them in a few months. So that was positive, and everybody followed. Not always very easily, but everybody followed.
Thank you, thank you. What I'm hearing, burning platforms and the commitment of staff, firefighters, their frontliners, commitment of the leadership, engagement, and then simplicity right from the very start. These are really fantastic, listening to the two of you. And still, I still see the importance of the structure, the infrastructure, the architecture within which your institutions are working, the technologies that were available, and the digital literacy of the staff, their capacity to react and firefight that kind of platform. The question, and this is one of the questions raised by the participant, is that in some institutions, it's not quite as easy because they have an aging workforce, and because of the differences in the, the level of preparation in terms of digital literacy, it's not quite as easy to do this plan, do, rapid succession. Okay, but there's nothing we can do about this. We just need to keep improving. We just need to keep moving forward. Would you have any advice? Would you have any suggestions as to how your organizations were actually able to build this up? I don't know if it's a conscious effort that, because you were leveling up the use of digital technologies, people were actually being required to upskill or acquire new skills. Would you like to comment on that, please?
Oh, I do have a few.
Yeah.
I do have a few comments, and I respect the question because we ask ourselves that question all the time. We do have I do employment insurance, but we also do pensions and pension systems. And the pension team is the eldest team in the government of Canada. It's kind of a freaking thing. So they too were virtualized. Like all of their work was virtualized. Now our systems are so ancient, they all work on paper. The files are paper, the applications are paper. And so when you virtualize the workforce, you can give them space age technology if you want, but the client is still living in the old world. So that's the key. The key was, well, we are still in that world. By the way, those systems are still there. They're going to pull us back into the old way of doing things because they are not changeable very quickly. So what we had to do very fast, to your point, how do you actually virtualize the workforce, even an agent workforce? Well, we gave them the same tools they had at work for the most part. And then we said, well, we're not going to be able to send the paper to them. So we had to, like, literally in a matter of days, scan everything. And so we didn't use NASA level technology. We scanned all the paper that was in our work inventory, and then we distributed that to everyone who was online. Then we took the process that was paper-based and we said, well, we need to have a form online, and to make it possible for clients who need to submit documents to be able to do it online. And we had been doing that, we had been working on this for a while. So we went from it's a good idea to it needs to be in place by Monday. And the only question was, can we actually get it done? Can we do it safely? And I would say to you, including on information security permissions, right? It would have taken us months to get our lawyers to agree to any of this, ever. And it's a miracle. The lawyers agreed in a matter of hours that we could do it. And you kind of go, it's not about change resistance, is that people actually play their role on defense instead of offense. When you're on we got to solve it by Monday kind of mode, it's amazing. Everyone will come to the table trying to get it done for Monday. But if you tell them we have 2 years to do it, they will take 2 years. It will take that long. And particularly with the enabling services, the frontline staff, they don't live that experience. They live the experience of, I've got a client in front of me. I'm speaking to a client on the phone. I got a chat line with a client. I'm solving the problem right now. But when you talk to lawyers and finance and even IT, well, we have methods, we have time. And so I think the deepest lesson I've learned is that mobilization at scale, you almost have to have a crisis to do it fast. So we can't engineer crises like the pandemic. I mean, that's like hopefully once in a century thing. But the fact is, though, we are going to definitely learn that in order to drive mobilization, we're going to have to engineer mobilization. And so what we're going to do, what we are now learning to do, is to cut up the work into small, incremental, iterative, faster deliverables, because that speed, that momentum is kind of replicating the good part of reacting to a pandemic, which is doing faster is more important than being completely right on the plans. My favorite line now is to my team, roughly right and precisely wrong. And so get 80% of it ready to go, and then we'll iterate to perfection, as opposed to let's aim for perfection or comprehensive or completeness, and then hold it back for months. So I think this is a liberating time in that sense for a public servant, for sure. In the private sector, I think they've been doing this for much longer than we have. But I think we're learning how to do that, and it's going to really help. I do have to say a couple of things around the nature of our old systems are going to pull us back. And I say that because we are now going to have to accelerate their transformation into something more modern. The politicians, and Jean-Marc mentioned that, our political masters, have now seen us able to stand up a 1,500 person call center in 9 days. So when you say the next time, well, no, it's going to take us a year, they're just not going to believe us anymore, right? They're not going to accept, because their expectations have been reset for a decade. And so the question then is, as a public service, how can we actually manage those expectations to say, yes, well, that was because we did all of those things. And you gave us permissions on all these fronts, and that's why we were able to go fast. And my view is, I'm trying very hard personally to mirror that with my conversation with ministers and say, well, ministers, if you give us the ability to go fast and you keep things simple and you give us the tools, we will give you speed. We will deliver more value for citizens faster. But if you make it hard and if you make it long and it's legislative, it's all of the things that make it very complicated, then you're going to get what you used to get. They have actually accepted that. I have to tell you that our politicians now are desperate for us to have new systems so we can go faster. They're desperate for us to find a way to become more productive in a digital environment. They absolutely, personally, like, you know, in our world, everyone is best friend now is Amazon.ca, right? Like nobody's going out to shop. And so that's true for citizens. Well, it's true for the ministers, and they absolutely know that we can't deliver services that way. So to Jean-Marc and his organization, which has been doing this for decades, right? Not months, decades. I think we're going to have to figure out how to do this in a few years instead of a decade. And I had a 10-year plan, which has now become a 5-year plan. And if I listen to my bosses any longer, they're going to make me do it in 3 years, which I don't think I can do. But I'm just saying that's the appetite for change that has not been set in. I hope that's helpful, Maribel.
Absolutely. Could you say that again, please, Benoit, what you said, roughly right? I love it.
Yes.
Roughly right.
Yes,
And what? What is the other one?
It's very catchy. It's roughly right and precisely wrong.
Wrong. Okay.
Don't spend all your time trying to get it precisely right, because
Okay.
you're just not going to deliver. Get
Okay.
enough right so you can actually go forward. And
All
then,
right.
then get it right over time, for sure.
Absolutely. Yes. Okay, Jean-Marc, over to you.
Yeah, I can only confirm what Benoit said, that there is an appetite for change because there is need, of course, and because of the uncertainty of the future, it makes it necessary. That, yeah, I can only confirm that there is a momentum, and we had to do, and we still have to do the thing fast. And that means sometimes accept that the quality is less high, or not everything is under control or perfect. The legal aspect, that's the same. Sometimes the regulation can be adapted on the really short run, or the point of view interpretation of the law can be more flexible in time of crisis. And I think we just the world has changed. And we are over a point of no return. I think the things after the pandemic will be fully different, and yeah, I think it's for the good. But still, there is a cost. It's not always easy or perfect at every level. If I take the level of the social security, I'm quite sure because we made the rules much easier that it was more possible to cheat and to get fraud. So I don't say it's huge, but it does exist. We know that. We've seen things from mafias and things like that doing, yeah, trying to get money, and they could get some money, I'm quite sure. And there is also a cost sometimes for workers as well, because telework is not uh, always easy for people. There are people that are just alone, and with the pandemic and limitation, you cannot see anyone. In Belgium, you can meet one person at your private level, except your family. But if you are alone at home and you can meet one person and you cannot go to work, you're quite alone, and that's really not so easy. The same with I'm at my office. I'm not at home today. I try to come sometimes, but this building is quite empty. But there is a woman on the second floor, and her family is quite big. And I think children are studying at home with video conferencing with university and things like that. One of them, of her son, I think, is working also in telework. So it's not possible for her to be at home because it's too small with a big family and a lot of people already working. So she still comes. It's not a big problem, but it could be a problem because it's still unsafe in the train. You're not sure. Well, I take the train as well, but it's okay. But if I had 10 like her or 20 like her on the same floor, it wouldn't be acceptable. So to say everything is fine, everybody's in telework, everybody is happy, I think it's not the case. There are exceptions, and we have to pay attention to follow people. We use more and more for few weeks psychologists. The local offices, they ask to have a psychological support because it's special times, a lot of pressure, external pressure, family pressure, professional pressure. So, okay, I'm happy we went so fast so far, and the thing will be different in the future. But to say everything is perfect and there are no collateral damage, it's not the case. I think there are collateral damage in the workers and for the society. One thing I have to say, at the operational level, something that helped us, and it was a relatively new project, that unfortunately not all our data are digitalized. In my organization, we have 118 or 14, I don't remember, forms that are still paper. Papers that it's not our choice to have to use these forms. They come from the regional authorities or things like that, work contracts and things like that. So what we've done we began this project 2 years ago, something like that. I don't remember precisely, but it's to digitalize internally all these documents. So we use AI system of OCR and things like that. So every document is recognized, and every national ID number is recognized with artificial intelligence, and it depends from one form to the other. There are information that are recognized. It's not perfect. It depends from one type of data to the other. We go to 85 to 95% recognition, but it helps us a lot because of we scan everything, and all the documentation, all documents are going, all forms are going to the in principle to the appropriate file. And though we can use it from home as well. So it was something I was very happy we had, is to something like 100% digitalization internally. So that's not important for the outside world, because this document have to stay on paper. So we have to manage them as well, to process them as well. But part of the job can be done at home, and it was a big help. Yeah, that's it for so far, I think.
Thank you for that, Jean-Marc. And you touched upon an issue that we've been receiving a lot of questions about it from the participants, the impact of stress. You talked about the burning platform, and then now you're talking about how people teleworking, how does this affect their mental health? What kind of support is the institution giving to people who are in teleworking? They have no social life. Perhaps Benoit, you could address it because Jean-Marc already started on it.
Sure. No, I'm happy to go there. And if Jean-Marc gives me permission, I'm going to appropriate a cultural symbol from Belgium to help me with this part of it. He's going to laugh when he sees it. So this is my favorite background with my team, which I use all the time to, I don't know if you can see it.
Is that asterisk?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
So the reason I show that is because, and I'm going to take it off because it's kind of weird, but to illustrate what has actually happened with our various teams. It is like aesthetics. The teams have gelled and come together literally in a fight against an enemy in this context that's a virus that's attacking every part of the life that they knew as people and members of the community, as well as having a role to play in that fight that gives them an opportunity to feel extremely valuable. They absolutely understand the role that they played in fundamentally setting and bringing security to their neighbors, their family members, the seniors in the country. And so the power of that is inestimable, right? The ability to actually forge that kind of union and that spirit, it's going to last a generation. So, which is good. So that's the positive side of the force of coming together. I won't say la potion magique, but it's close, right? It's the kind of strength that comes only from that ability to mobilize and unify to a common purpose. I think what we're now living with is the fact that we had to do a brute force change and nobody got any chance whatsoever to prepare for any of the changes, including how to organize your personal life, how to stop commuting. We like, even personally, like we got rid of 2 cars. I mean, it is changing all of our lives in a very subtle way, but in not so subtle ways. And as employees, our employer has to adapt with us, but more importantly is to be ahead of us. And so the leadership has spent a fair amount of time talking through, well, what is the state of people's mental well-being currently? And, we've done surveys, or we're doing pulse surveys, really quick. And it's remarkable. People are highly resilient. I think we're more resilient than general population because of the role we've played. That will not last forever. People are getting tired. They're exhausted. It's a marathon exhaustion. It's not we're out of breath because we ran a sprint. We're out of every part of energy because it's a long marathon. So the question then becomes, what are we going to do in a digital environment, virtual workplace, in order to support people? And so we've had to kind of get creative, have team building events. My team recently, we hired a comedian. It was the best thing we ever did. We could have hired a motivational speaker that would have given us lots of big concepts and, a speech from the mountain there. No, a comedian is what people needed. And so we're going to have to kind of innovate that way. We're going to have to come up with new strategies to pull people together because they're not physically together. And that physical response that we get as human beings, we're highly social, we're not getting, and that's going to have an impact over time. We did give them collaboration tools. Like we deployed MS Teams, the Microsoft Teams solution, across the organization in a matter of weeks. My team was the first one to get virtualized. And I said that because we were a transformation. So presumably we could transform faster than everybody else. Well, we had 3 types of tools over a course of 6 or 8 weeks, because every time we picked a tool like Zoom, the government would come in and say, you can't use Zoom, it's not secure, so we're going to have to give you a new tool. It was nightmare. It was not as, I describe it as like, it's not seamless. It was not easy, but it was fast, right? You didn't get a chance to really resist and build up a challenge, but we did give people a tool to actually collab better like Zoom is. And in that way, we mirrored society, because society is also collaborating in ways that we never thought we would. I have to tell you, the simplification of policy is by far the most important. I've mentioned it before, and I don't want to get boring, but it's pretty fundamental. And then I would say the last part, and I think Jean-Marc will recognize what I'm about to say, governance, which we all take very seriously as public servants, has been engineered for peacetime, and we need governance for wartime. And I'm sorry, I'm using the metaphor of war here, not to insult anyone, but just to say that that level of mobilization, we need a flatter set of organizations that actually have the ability to react quickly, to make decisions that are paced. And I mean that, paced with the flow of work. If the flow of work is going to go faster, you're going to have to make decisions faster. You're likely to have to move the decisions closer to the front line than the generals. So the corporals have to make more decisions, not the generals. And that is hard on everybody. If you're the head of Employment and Social Development Canada, and you're the deputy minister of the whole department, like we're talking 28,000 people, and you're told, you know, your decision process from last month is in the way, then it's hard, right? So how does he do his job? And how does he know that we're safe to do our job? And it required immediate trust. It required more flow of information up and down. And I mean, we're talking like a meeting where there's 30 executives, where everyone gets 2 minutes and say, I'm doing this today. And people would say, go. Not, well, we should study this, and we should have a committee, and we should have a task team. And all of that went away. It's not sustainable, but it will come back. So the question is, when the elastic comes back of governance and oversight and all of that, what will it look like? And I do believe it needs to mirror a lot closer wartime than peacetime. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to insult anybody by that, but it's true. You have to kind of get away with all of the arcane governance, and you got to engineer simplicity, bring decision-making to the people who can make decisions, and then make sure there's a lot of trust. You can verify, but trust as much as you can, because that's the only way we're going to get speed. And digital, I have to tell you, digital by nature is speed. It's not slow, it's fast. And if it's going to be fast, then the organizations are going to change. That would be it for me.
Thank you, Benoit. From the two of you, I'm getting so many quotable quotes. Digital is speed, roughly right, precisely wrong, point of no return. This is from Les Miserables, I think, Jean-Marc, and the momentum. Okay.
I hope Jean-Marc knows how to sing, because you don't want me to sing. I'll accompany you on the piano if you want, but not this.
But okay, so many points, many questions. And just to drill down further, the point raised by Jean-Marc, and then all this hiring a comedian and trying to, the team building and team activities. There's another question here related to that before we move on. Can the panelists comment on the challenge faced by teleworking to be self-managed and to balance getting work done from home? I think we touched it a little bit, but maybe just 2 or 3 comments, quick comments to respond to this.
Yeah, for us, it's difficult to answer to this question because we already had telework. So not for everyone, but for most of the people, just it was 1 day a week. So just to change everything, yeah, of course we try to support the people doing this, and we had to, but that was not the main point in April or in March. So yeah, in time of crisis, I don't know what to say. Just the people had to do it. They've done it. Sometimes it was not easy, but they had to do it with exceptions. But something I would have liked to add to what Benoit said is that I will hire a comedian, but if you want a tip, send chocolates. Send Belgian chocolate to your workers. It helps. We do it really. We really
and
do
beer,
it.
And beer, please. Beer and chocolate.
Yeah, beer. We will do it.
Okay, what about sending me beer and chocolates?
Yeah, with a quarantine, I don't know if I may. But no, but what's important to know is that the people, and it's linked with telework, is there is a real problem with isolation of certain people in general, because you may not have contact with others and things like that. So that's a problem. Just to know how to react is very, very difficult. What I try to do as a manager is I regularly send messages to my works, just to say, okay, we are together, and we send also small gifts or things like that. An extra day off, we've done it two or three times, just an extra day holiday. You just say, okay, you use it next year, but you get it a little bit extra money. We have relatively few margin to give money like that, but we could do it. And for example, we've already done virtual team building, not for all the teams, but it's beginning virtual team buildings. And for our big New Year party, we will have to adapt, and they are my teams are preparing virtual New Year party. The idea is to send food and beer and everything to everyone just before the day, the specific day. And there will be a team building with teams of 4 to 8 people. So a lot of small teams will have things to do. I don't remember what precisely, but the idea is to hear me a little bit talking, and then to have fun, but everybody at home, and eating and drinking beers and champagne. I don't know what, but things like that. And it's important to do things like that. And I like the idea of hiring comedian. We haven't had this, but I like the idea.
And you do have some of the best, so you should absolutely keep them employed. If I can add one thing, we have a charitable campaign that we run in the public service. And you would think that in a time of pandemic, people would be kind of looking inside and worried about their own lives. It's probably going to be one of our most successful campaigns. And certainly in some of our teams, it's been amazing. So there's a deep pool in the public service of people who are willing and able to commit to a higher standard of service. The challenge is we're going to abuse it, not because we're deliberately doing that. We're just going to know too late that we used it too much. And so we need to put in place early, I think, strategies. I won't say toolkits, but pretty close. So strategies and help for our employees, whether it's helplines or communities of practice, or allowing people to be able to take time and engineer time differently at home, because now they're teleworking, than assuming that we're back in the office and it's a 9 to 5 kind of day. And that we're going to learn on as we do. I go back to precisely wrong. If we had planned it, we would have tried to get it to a right thing. Now we didn't plan it, so now we throw ourselves in it, and now we're going to kind of iterate ourselves to the right balance of how people are going to work at home. They're going to have flexibilities that we've never allowed before. I mean, it took us months before to allow somebody to work virtually. Now we sent everybody home. And now we're coming back saying, well, you know what? If you want to work from 6 to midnight, because we can actually make it that possible for you, or I'm maybe exaggerating, but 4 to 10, we're going to accommodate that, because frankly, we know they have to look after their kids at home, because we can see them in the background. They're walking through meetings, right? And then you kind of go, so if we're adapting that way, so what are the tools that we're going to need in order to manage the workforce? I have to say, we're looking at a workforce tool, a scheduling tool, and that's what I meant by decision making, to push that decision of who is going to be scheduled in the call center or in the processing center. Well, employees will schedule themselves. That would be my goal. Why? Because first of all, we've trusted them so far, and they've actually delivered. So why don't we trust them a bit more, or continue to do so, and say, go to a scheduling tool, say, I'm going to work these hours. The tool will accumulate the capacity across the entire system. And as long as we can meet our service standards, why not? I mean, that's the shock, right? Why not? As opposed to, oh no, it doesn't work that way. Our hierarchy, our managers have to have a job, and their job is to oversee another set of managers. And yeah, in a crisis, you don't have that. In crisis, you flatten it very quickly. You say, well, I've got people who answer the phone. I got a system that can coordinate how many can be available to answer phones. And I got a whole bunch of clients who are desperate to reach somebody to get help, right? So that triangle, very fast, doesn't include a whole lot of management, right? It has to deliver real fast. And you say, well, why would we change that going forward if it works? If it doesn't work, well, of course, we'll change it. So we'll need some software. We're going to need some technology supports, but I don't think this is, NASA space stuff. This is stuff that we already have. In some cases, we probably own somewhere, and we just haven't used it in that productive sense. So I think that's coming. And I mean, like we're not even going to ask permission anymore. We're literally starting, and then we're getting it roughly right and precisely wrong.
Maribel,
Yes, yes.
can I add something?
Yeah, yes, you have to unmute yourself.
I'm not mute. Am I? Okay. So just something I forgot about telework, and it's quite a big problem. If that the information from the workers, the bottom up information, it's not so fluent or easy as before, because when everybody is on the ground floor, it's very easy. You meet the people, you feel a thing. I see when there are problems with my direct workers, but with telework, I don't see it. In fact, I'm in contact for professional reasons. We have Teams or Zoom meetings and things like that, but I don't have a lot of conversation, just a casual conversation, maybe with 2, 3, 4 people, but much less than before. And so I think it can become a problem with people, let's say, hiding problems or stress or things like that, and maybe they don't say it. So far, we haven't had big problems at this level, but it could be there, and that can emerge and bring bigger problem later. But so far, it's not the case. And linked to that, in fact, I don't know if there is a link, and probably there is a link, is that our relationship with the trade union these months is very good. They complain sometimes, and it's normal, it's their job, or they bring solutions as well. But the relationship hasn't been so good for years. So I'm happy we are together, and they can be a channel also to say, okay, there are problems over there, or people don't feel comfortable and things like that. But of course, we know sometimes it's not easy, and I already said it. We send psychologists in certain local offices, but it stays limited so far.
Yeah, and just to add to what you said, Jean-Marc, and you referred to it earlier, actually, it might also be because the teleworking and the relationship with mental stress, it might also be because of the environment. We are under duress, and we really do not know when the pandemic will end and when things will normalize. But let's just kind of jump forward and say, okay, things are restored. And what we're seeing from the pandemic is that the technology is actually uncoupling the work from finite hours and locations. You don't have to have a 9-to-5 job. You do not have to go to an office building and stay there. It's no longer a place to go. Work is no longer a place to go, but a place to connect. If you can connect and the external databases are available, you can actually do your teleworking. So that looking forward, perhaps teleworking would actually give, that a different kind of thing on mental stress, that it can actually be positive, and that it actually gives the staff the flexibility to work in an office, work at home. I don't know, what do you think about that?
I would totally agree. Oh, sorry.
No, it's all right. Okay, do we go? Okay, in fact, it's what we already wanted to do before. There was a kind of, I don't know, a trend in the public management in Belgium, sometimes in other countries, a little bit in the Netherlands, I think, things like that. And the name is New Ways of Working. And it began in year 2009, 2010 in Belgium. And the idea is to give a lot of autonomy and freedom to the workers, civil servant, I mean. And so the idea is that the workers choose alone in his autonomy where he works, when he works, and how he works. So that was already something we are doing or trying to do for a few years in Belgium, and social security administration in particular, public administration in particular. And we've begun this in 2014 in my organization. So that was already the trend. Of course, with the pandemic and the momentum, it has accelerated. And yeah, we support this. I support this 200 person as a manager. And I think it's the pandemic at this level helps us quite a lot. So we support that 200%. Yeah.
I think those are all very good points, and I appreciate Jean-Marc's comments here. We two things. First, there are still limitations that will be brought forward because of our aging systems and the flexibilities that would be required in order to support a mobile mindset. I mean, the mindset is not just in our heads; it's the whole structure that supports mobility. And what I would say to all of everyone who's listening is that our experience so far is that the resistors to mobility and homework are not employees. It's management. It's middle management, because you kind of go, well, I don't have the normal tools that I used to have in order to manage. So we need to support managers in that change themselves, because otherwise they'll become a resistor to, well, we'd like to get back to the old days where we could actually see the work, as opposed to, no, we're going to see the outcomes and we're going to worry about workers and support them. But the fact is, we're actually trying to figure out how to support our workers, public servants, in achieving outcomes, not just measuring inputs. And I think that shift in mindset from a management perspective is a big deal. I'm trying to engineer this at the government level by having my programs measured no longer on inputs, but just on outcomes. And that's a revolution. Why? Because that changes the way we manage, but it also means that for those of us who can actually mobilize our workforce in such a way as to create the flexibility of workforce, work times, scheduling, and get the most productivity out of everybody, even if we're distant from each other physically, we're going to go faster. And I mean, speed, I go back to speed. Velocity should become one of our core strategies in service delivery, because velocity in the digital environment is the difference between, new and innovative and old and non-performing. So the mindset around mobile, I think, is what we've talked about for years. I mean, I know I was the chief technology officer for the government for some time. We talked for years about the impacts and positives, and we would look at the private sector organizations, and I'll name IBM here for a minute, but other big consulting firms who have been mobile and working from different locations across the world for many years. And we say, yeah, they can get away with that, but the government, we can't do that. We're just not set up for that. And you kind of go, how come? And the value of this particular crisis is that it's shaken everyone's belief that the resistance we had to mobile has got to go, because everyone wants mobile. I mean, and to your point, and I'll finish on this. In my country, we have a very large landmass, as you know. And that means that politicians have always been challenged to agree with the public service that the jobs should be near the capital, right? Because you need to be close to the center of power, and you should be close. So if your minister wants you to brief them, you can show up in person. And, we're briefing our ministers in their cars, right? So they're sitting in their car, and we're never going to be able to say to them, by the way, the call center, no, we have to put it in an urban center, because that's where the jobs are, because now the jobs are moving into the geography where people are. And people, I'm telling you, are going to be much more productive if they choose to go into a smaller community that has extraordinary bandwidth, right? Because that's what we're going to really need in the future. That will be the new oil. It's bandwidth, and new gold, perhaps I should say. And all of a sudden, decisions around even where we put workers is going to be completely different. We're not even going to ask that question. We're going to say, where are they and who's willing to work in this environment? Because that's the people we need. And the call center all of a sudden goes from a place to a virtual thing. And then the virtualization of the call center, and I'm using call centers as an example, but processing centers will be the same way, why are we limiting ourselves to options that say we can only put the jobs in the capital? So politicians, I think, will grab onto this idea pretty soon. All politics is local. And so that means that they'll be quite happy when the jobs are finding their way back into local, regional communities, as opposed to, well, you have to be in the capital because that's where the real action is. So I think that will be an interesting sequel. When you say what's the future, future is we are decentralizing work. We're mobilizing our workforce and making them mobile and teleworking. And that means management will have to adapt fully. This is not, I think, something management will be able to slow down or even stop. But I may be wrong. We'll take 5 years to know if I'm right or wrong.
I do agree with you, but we've beyond that, as I said earlier, in Belgium, in the public administration, my administration 2014, we decided for the workers, civil servant who didn't want to measure their time anymore, they could do it. So it's possible. So we say, okay, you have to have a certain results outcome, and we don't measure your time anymore. So you have to work 38 hours a week in average, but we don't have it anymore. Of course, if you work only 20 hours, it would be a problem. But for the rest, it's quite a success. And with telework, productivity is much higher in telework. It's just like that. The people motivation, the workers' motivation is bigger. They don't have commuting time, and in Belgium, it can, even if it's a small country, I have 3 hours every day commuting time, so it's quite long. So if I stay at home, it's time I have for my family and things like that, and it's a win-win. I can give more to my work and give more to my family. So that's sure. Only the thing was, it was 1 day a week, and we wanted to go to a second day, and now it's 4 days and a half on average. Yeah, it's good. Going forward.
Thank you. I'm looking at the watch and I cannot believe that we only have like, 8 minutes left. There's so many, really what I said, that there's so many quotable quotes that I can pick up from this conversation. I will certainly be looking at the replay of this webinar, and the participants, of course, that this webinar is being recorded and that it will be available on the ISA website by tomorrow, I would say. And so many messages, so many insights I can see from this conversation between Mr. Long and Mr. Vandenberg. And but what seems to be really so important for me is, like Benoit said, let's not waste the pandemic. And Jean-Marc is saying, we have the appetite for change. There is the momentum. There's the point of no return. And what I can see is that the pandemic is actually giving us a watershed, a lot of evidence to change things moving forward. You can talk to the aging workforce in the institution and say, we have to get out of paper. We have to stop this kind of thing. We have to transition. So now we do not have to reason, but because they have gone through the experience of having the need to work fast, and maybe borrowing from your slogan, simplicity is velocity. Simplicity is digital, is velocity. Maybe this is the way forward, and all the more reason that we need to really build the digital literacy of the workforce. So before we run out of time, I would just like, again, not to overburden you with this conversation, but if you could, just give us your 3 key insights on, what we are learning from this pandemic, how to go forward, that would really be lovely. Maybe this time I start with Jean-Marc.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Maribel. You have to ask the question again. I was distracted by an important message. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, it's just that like we were talking in this webinar, there are so many changes that need to be done. Old ICT systems need to go, and if people were being difficult before the pandemic happened, now you have every reason, you have the evidence to show that, hey, these things do not work anymore, whether it is within the institution or whether you're talking with regulators, with policymakers, with politicians. You now actually have evidence to say the way to go is this way. And the thing that we have now is not working anymore. So in that context, what would be the, I don't know, the two top things, the three top things that you would say, yeah, these are the priority actions that need to be done, the next steps, the direction in which we are going. In many ways, what you and Benoit have been doing in the past, before the pandemic happened, it's an affirmation that you are actually taking the institution in the right direction. And now that we have evidence of things that do not work and the things that do work, then I think this will, as you said, Benoit, Jean-Marc, the momentum is there and the impetus to change for simpler things is there.
Yep. Okay. So the two things I would recommend, but yeah, you know, I'm a believer for your quotes, is that first thing, I hope we will be able to stabilize on the short run what we have now, because it's good to have disruptive change, but it cannot last too long. It's too tough for the structures, for the organizations. Our level of absenteeism is more than 10% now because of people confronted to the pandemic, but because of stress and things like that, it's much too much. We have to land, and I'm afraid it will be for spring next year. But so to stabilize and to optimize what we've done, I think we've made a very big jump forward, but we have to stabilize. So second point, and that's where I'm a believer, I still believe in artificial intelligence. So we are trying things, we've done nice things, but yeah, it's not enough. And of course, the maturity of artificial intelligence is not perfect everywhere, but I think it will change the things quite a lot. And yeah, I believe it will help us to make the thing better for our citizens.
So thank you, Jean-Marc. For myself, I've said a lot of things about velocity, but I would say something different about policy. So let me use three buckets. On the policy front, I do believe we have to embrace, as income security organizations across the world, more simplicity. Digital will push us there, but there's always a tendency for us to want to go back to what we understand best, which is, well, we need better rules and smarter rules, and we need to kind of administer smartly. It all comes from the simplicity of our programming. So if I had anything to encourage any organization on the planet, is to continue to push towards simpler programs that meet the needs, but allow more trust in the clients being able to adapt and adopt simpler programs. Now, it's easy for me to say. I'm just saying from that perspective, I think that drives more velocity on the service delivery side, which I think is inevitable. And I think there we're definitely going to have to continue, to Jean-Marc's point, not go back, but how to keep going forward. Well, a body in motion is hard to catch, right? So we're going to have to keep moving faster and faster. And as we do, you are actually going to reduce resistance because nobody has a chance to kind of pull you back. I know it's a little abstract, but it's kind of true. I know because I run away from central agencies all the time. And the way I do that is I go faster than they do. So they never get to slow me down or as much as they would like to, because I just run faster than they do. The last comment I would make, it is about people, and the theme for today, and thank you for creating this opportunity. The theme is around people. We're in the people business. That's our job. That's what we care about. But we also have important employee dimensions that we need to take care of. And I think we're at the beginning of learning that. And I would certainly encourage ISA to give us forums where we can exchange strategies around how to manage, how to support, how to enable employees in an age where it's virtual, it's mobile. It's not just our clients that are mobile, our employees are mobile. Work is changing enormously, and we're going to need to learn. And I have to tell you, we're going to try a lot of different things, and we may succeed at most and fail at some. But if we can exchange some of those important lessons across the jurisdictions, I think that will make us all stronger, because we're in this for it's a marathon. We're in this for a long time. And the pandemic, as you know, we're still in it. We're in the second wave, and we have no idea how long that's going to last, but it's, maybe a year, 2 years. We are going to need to really dig deep to get through this. So learning and sharing is really important. So thank you again. And thank you, Marcello, for sponsoring this today. Appreciate it. And Jean-Marc, it's always a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jean-Marc and Benoit. But before I turn it over to the Secretary General, if I may, I know we're out of time, but I have a colleague who's insisting that I raise this question about robotic process automation. Is this something that you have been trying already? Maybe we can organize another webinar on this topic, but is this something that your organizations are already doing, robotic process automation? Just a quick one, please.
Yes, we've made some real big investments. We've created a center of excellence, and we've deployed it in every one of our old systems at the same time as we tried to digitize everything we were doing. So yes, definitely worth a conversation.
Yeah, we tried something. So we did something, and it was a success. So, but not a huge things, but it helped us. But RPA are relatively small thing. They're not huge things at our level, at least, but it helped us. There are limitations, but you can improve your productivity on the short run, not on the long run. It becomes dangerous, but that's for another time, maybe.
Okay, on behalf of the panelists and the ISA team, thank you so much, Mr. Benoit Long, Mr. Jean-Marc Vandenberg. I give back the floor to the Secretary General now. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you all. It was really a very interesting webinar, a new way of doing the webinar in ISA. And I was taking notes during the webinars, and I think that we can get some important lessons for these webinars. And I see that permanent lessons, not just temporary lessons. We are facing a temporary crisis due to COVID, but there are some permanent lessons. One thing that I see is that there is a need to find solutions in second best, to look at second best. And while we are looking at second best, we must need to find a balance between the speed that we want to get to that solution and the best solution. And something like the best is enemy of the good, in the sense that we need to find a balance between the speed and also the best solutions. And the second lesson is that in order to get these second best, there is a need for readiness, to simplify things, to get things simple. But at the same time that we are increasing that speed, it's also creating some, let me say, caveats, if I cannot find a better name. There is one caveat is that, okay, we are doing adaptations in a very quick speed. And as we are doing this, it's increasing the level of expectations. We're doing changes in a very good speed. But as we are doing this change, so the expectations to innovations from the public is also increasing. So there will be a higher level of expectations as we were able to adapt ourselves quite quickly. And the second caveat that was mentioned today, but I'm also seeing on other webinars and talking with people, is that there is a caveat that is related to the simplification and the speed by the one side, and the potential increase in error, evasion, and fraud by the other side. So it's to look at the balance between this. A third lesson that I see from these webinars is that we are dealing now with teleworking. and it in a much stronger way than we used to see, especially if we are talking about government. And some questions are raising. How can we get an appropriate work-life balance of teleworking and staying at home period? And also not just the work-life balance and something related to it, the networking that we have with our partners that work with us during this teleworking period, and one more related to the efficiency of the things that perhaps there will be a shift that will focus more on the results than on the process itself. Some change will happen in managing the human resource as well. And the fourth lesson is that, okay, we can face temporary crisis, but there is always some permanent questions that will appear, like we always work with heterogeneous staff regarding level of education, age, digital literacy, and how do we adapt and adopt new models, new service, new technologies with this heterogeneous staff, and also team building exercise. So some lessons that it's quite permanent even before, and we will continue afterwards. So thank you very much, Maribel. Thank you very much, Mark, Benoit, for this very good webinar. Well, there is a poll now in which you can express your opinion. Yes, it is. And well, all the videos will be available. I think that tomorrow they will be available at our webpage. There is also a WhatsApp group in which you can network with other colleagues, and the webinars will continue in English, French, Spanish, and also in other language. So thank you very much, really thank you, and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody, bye-bye.
Merci, au revoir. Bye-bye, Maribel. Take care.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you so much.